This is Coda Radio, episode 228 for October 24th, 2016. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Coda Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show, taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. This episode is brought to you by our two fine sponsors, DigitalOcean and Linux Academy. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. But me? Well, thanks for asking. My name is Chris, and joining me every single week is our host, still smarting from his breakup with Mr. Ken Bone. It's Mr. Michael Dominic. Hello, Mike.
Yakshimash, friends! Welcome to this very special Polish edition and gay edition of Coda Radio.
You got me down the rabbit hole with this Ken Bone stuff. I knew there was controversy. But you
Holy mackerel, controversy. That's a very oh boy.
I didn't know. And then I read your Twitter feed, and then my dreams and my hopes of the common man.
It's that part of Reddit where I'm like, am I really not on 4chan? I avoid 4chan like the plague. But
I think Mr. Bone had some free time on his hands. And
I think Mr. Bone, perhaps a bone.
Hey, come on now.
Hello, everybody.
Come on now. So
this is not a family show today.
We are gathered here today to make Chris cry because Mike's made a big new purchase, got himself a new rig. We'll be talking about that.
That's right, a young buck named Alfonso.
And we also have ourselves a little bit of pulling back the curtain to discuss. After that, someone out there is making a transition that I think Mike may endorse or may scoff at. And then last but not least, I really liked an article about how to properly design an API. And it's just nice, straightforward language. And we'll talk about that, plus a bunch of other random things we're going to throw into this here episode. Not bad, huh? Not bad for 228 of these things.
228. You and I have been together, I did the math, longer than every marriage in the state of New Jersey.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think
it's not that impressive if you only count our governors, though, because we have a bad history of closeted gay governors.
Oh, is that a thing?
Chris, I wanted to talk to you about Colonel Linux staying over your house, by the way.
I don't think he's ever stayed at my house.
I might be confusing him with somebody else.
He does stay at the studio from time to time. He does stay at the studio. Actually, he did stay at the rig with me once when we were going somewhere to pick up ham radio. That's right. So it has happened. He has slept in my place. That's true. That is true. But you're trying to distract from the big news. I mean, this is like top voted story in the subreddit news. This is like retweet a dozen times kind of news. This is favorite it with whatever that heart is. Big news. Like some people, if they're more connoisseurs of news, may even say it's breaking news.
This is CNN breaking news.
Oh,
so you got yourself one of them lemurs over there at the System76. One of these 13 inchers, right?
Let me tell you what happened.
Yeah, tell me all about it, because last time I checked, you were building iOS apps, and you were building Android apps, and you were building iOS apps. Oh, and iOS apps, which last time I checked, Xcode don't work on Linux. Have you gone crazy?
I'm sorry. What kind of apps was I building? So I was at a draft Magic the Gathering party at my house.
Is this for real? Are you pulling my leg?
No, this is for real.
Okay.
And I got stuck on baby duty by the missus because, there were other strapping young gentlemen there. And, girls got a party, right?
Word. She got to get the hell out of there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, she was there. She was drafting. Oh, she's a hardcore planeswalker.
Oh, she had work to do.
She's like Liliana. So I'm...
Mama's got to hustle.
I'm sitting there holding the baby, watching My Little Pony. I shit you not.
Now, the new one or the old one? Because the new one's...
The new one's awesome, dude. We could have a whole episode on how awesome My Little Pony is.
How about that, Applejacks, right?
No, forget Applejack. It's all about Princess Luna, or as you might know her, Nightmare Moon. Oh, in fact, I was listening to a song of hers on YouTube today. Can we play it in the show without getting DMCA'd? Probably not.
Probably not.
Okay.
No, I actually got a takedown from my own voice a couple of weeks ago, so I don't think so.
Yes. It's like the inception of DMCA takedown.
The worst part is not even the first time. It's not even the first. It's the worst. Okay, so you find yourself there. You are with Kid. Magic the Gathering's happening.
Magic the Gathering was happening between sneaking videos of Tiffany Albert, who's a great singer, and the kid wanting to watch My Little Pony. I got a bit lonely. You know how I get, Chris. I send strapping young men such as yourself messages when I'm lonely. No response, okay. And I happen to have the wonderful, the beautiful, the handsome, dare I say devilishly handsome Ryan Snipes on Telegram.
Yes,
Snipes.
yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, Ryan's been on the show before.
He has. And I sent him a message saying, hey, Ryan, I'm a bit lonely. What you doing? What you wearing?
I don't think this is how this went down. Something's telling me this isn't reading right.
You don't think this is how this happened?
I don't for some reason, especially because that almost sounds like more work than just going to their website.
No, I really did telegram him, actually.
Oh, okay.
I was like, I'm bored. I'm thinking of buying a laptop. I know Macs come out in a week and a half, but that seems too mainstream. What do you got?
It is kind of funny that you chose to do this right as the new MacBooks. Like, now we actually even have an announcement day.
Well, you know what? This is where it's at for the clickbait. That's all I'm going to say. Like, right now is the right time.
You're right. Hold on. I got to just do a quick check. I'm going to go over. I got to find the Mac Rumors website. Hold on. Let me go into my Mac News here. I'm going to go to the Mac Rumors. I'm going to pull this up. In 2 days, 21 hours, and 46 minutes, as we record this, new MacBooks will be announced. You renegade.
I'm a freaking rebel, baby.
Is it really, though? Is it really about them finally updating the MacBooks, or is it something bigger, though? I mean, what is this? Why now?
So first of all, Ryan, I had never considered the Lemur, which is the one I ended up ordering.
Yeah.
I've always kind of looked at the Gazelle. Yeah. The Oryx's a little too big for me. I've been sort of dilly-dallying with this. And I ended up, Ryan says, take a look at the Lemur. So I take a look at the Lemur. With my budget, which was only like $1,600, you can pimp this baby out. I mean, SSDs, 512, 16 gigs of RAM. I'm sorry, some Mac users making eyes at me right now. It's very awkward.
You would not get a MacBook that is probably as equipped as you would like for that price. When I've configured MacBooks for production here at JB, which we haven't bought any for a long time, but they were probably $2,800, before tax.
Yeah. And this is with, I'm impatient 2-day shipping, which is why it's coming today.
Good man.
So, I have not yet gotten my little paws on it, which is slightly disappointing. I was hoping it would come before the show. I've heard a couple things about it. It's got the Kaby Lake too, which is also a big
it's got the 7th gen Intel processor, and you can actually cram 2 freaking hard drives into this 13-inch laptop, which I find to be.
Now I don't know if you can do it aftermarket.
Oh yeah,
I did not.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah. So that's even better.
Typically, although I've never touched this new one because this was just recently updated. Typically, they are much more user serviceable than a MacBook.
Well, the Macs are basically not user serviceable, right?
So this is where I wanted to kind of go towards. There's a couple of things. There's 2 things that I used to really like about computers. I liked being able to buy them strategically when it worked for me, and I liked being able to give them additional capabilities a year down the road. So say maybe you decide at some point, I'm going to run Windows and Linux, or 2 different versions of Linux on this. It's nice to be able to add a second storage drive down the road when you'd like, or upgrade at this. I can't even believe I have to say this, but it's actually a nice feature to be able to upgrade your own RAM. This thing can go up to 32 gigs of RAM. You could start with, what did you start with?
16.
Yeah, so you can start at 16, and then when Black Friday rolls around and there's a great deal at Newegg on RAM, you could throw 32 into this thing, and it's just a matter of taking off the bottom of the laptop. It's not a huge deal. It might not have the same build, I don't know, as a MacBook Pro. I would bet that would probably be hard to do in something that's actually serviceable. But
so there's a few things that people have been saying on Twitter that I'm a little concerned about, right? The trackpad, battery life, and just general build quality. Yeah. Now I have to say, like, a MacBook doesn't do super well if you drop it anyway.
No, they dent. They do dent very easily.
In terms of general build quality, I don't know if that's a real thing I need to worry about. I carry a mouse with me like a sick weirdo, almost
Okay.
like a Ken Bone kind of guy.
If you go Ken Bone on your mouse, and you've always, I bring these little Logitech MX Anywhere mice with me. I always have one in my laptop bag. They're great full-time mice, and they're also great portable mice. I do believe that, I don't believe any company has ever made a trackpad quite like Apple has. Because it's not just the way it feels, which is better than any trackpad.
Well, I think
but
there's
it's also
hardware-software integration there.
Yep, it's the software OS level stuff that only really OS X and Apple are going to be able to pull off. At the same time, I find all trackpads these days to be serviceable on any modern laptop that's like 5th generation Intel or later. I find them all to be serviceable and usable, and I can work on them if I have to, but I still prefer to have my own separate standalone mouse. And you can actually, if you want to go crazy, you can pair the Magic Trackpad, or whatever Apple calls it, the standalone trackpad.
That's ridiculous. I just plug it in my Naga mouse and I'm good to go.
There you go. But I've actually tried it just as an experiment, and you can use it on Linux.
So I don't know. I mean, at home, my full-time machine is a Raytel Pro, right? It's the System76 Tower. So it's not like this is the first Linux machine by any stretch of the imagination. This is the first built for Linux laptop, and that's where I've had pain before, right? Trying to slam Linux on laptops like the most recent Dell XPS that my wife commandeered, where the graphics card did not cooperate with Linux.
Yeah, you got bit by an early Skylake issue.
Yeah, I got bit by a Skylake issue. I've gotten bit by other Dell laptops that were not made for Linux that had all kinds of weird, like, visual or audio issues. That
you got a batch of timing and hardware that I think is unprecedented in modern Linux history, because typically Intel support is so nailed down in Linux, but they just really fumbled it.
Well, and to be fair though, right? Skylake sucked for the Microsoft guys. I mean, go listen to Paul Thurrott. He'll tell you how much.
And there's likely a reason why we never saw a Skylake MacBook Pro ship either.
I think that was actually wise on Apple's part. They were just avoiding garbage, right? One other thing I would add is, so because everything's in life is about expectations. I'm starting to find when the FedEx man in his short little purple shorts comes in. Hey Chris, I gave him your number, by the way.
Oh, good.
I'm expecting to open this, plug it in, turn it on, and have it work. So much so that I bought a Dell monitor. Let me see if I can bring it up. It's the cinema display equivalents.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I'm going full Linux because I use a cinema display at work. So obviously that would not, work, right? My workstation's very.
What you're gonna have to look into is what you might find disappointing is HDMI only supports so high of a resolution and refresh rate. This could be an issue for you.
This could be an issue. I am slightly concerned about that.
You may find more success adapting the VGA port, because VGA is surprisingly able to go up to extremely high resolution. So you may be able to use the VGA port with an adapter.
I heard that, but I heard the VGA refresh rates were kind of garbage.
That could be, and I would imagine, but I've never tried it.
Anyway, right? I'm looking at the Dell Ultra Sharp. This is what I ordered. I just pasted it in the chat. The U2715H Dell. You need better names for your product lines. I just want to throw that out for you boys.
Oh, that's a pretty monitor.
Yeah, that is a pretty monitor. It is the exact equivalent of the cinema display I have, but of course half the price because it's not made by Apple.
I bet you could put a link to this in the System76 support page and ask them what your chances are going to be, and they could give you an answer before you even take it out of the box.
True.
They may not have tested it, but they might have an idea of what the maximum resolution that because there is something, because I have run into the problem of Intel graphics and HDMI out and limitations, because I have a 2K monitor upstairs, also 27-inch, and I believe it knocks it down to a lower resolution.
I'm hoping it can pull off the 256 or whatever it is. I forgot what it is, 260.
Yeah, that's a great resolution. So here's what I'm trying to get to. So you got yourself a nice setup, but what I'm trying to scratch at under the surface is what was it that decided you to move off of the MacBook for your next laptop? Because I'm not clear if it's maybe Apple's weird stance on their update frequency. I'm not clear if it's because Linux has become a superior platform for certain types of work. What was sort of the deciding factor? Or is it just simply that you could buy 2 of these a year for one MacBook?
Well, that does help, right? I mean, I could literally get bored with this in 6 months, buy a Gazelle, and be fine.
Yeah, or
an
you could.
XPS 13.
I mean, I would not advise this, but you could literally almost afford to buy every other iteration they do of this product and still be ahead. And the other nice thing about these System 76 products is they seem to have they have been updating for this year. I've been watching this particularly to compare it against Apple, and they are basically iterating after every major Intel generation after they've had some R&D time internally to make sure it works. And they're really staying on top of this stuff. And right now, the Oryx Pro is like an unbelievably powerful machine that a lot of people in our audience are picking up.
So there's a few things here, right? One, I wrote a post about this briefly on DominicM.com entitled Buy MacBook Hello Lemur. One of the primary drivers of this is that, I definitely feel like I want to skate to where the puck is going, to use the old expression. And granted, given my 50% or 100% failure rate, as discussed on last episode, I could be wrong.
Yeah, you say here, I'm making a bet that the puck is going towards Linux-powered AI, which makes, and then I noticed that somebody, who was it in the subreddit? Werner in the subreddit said, so that means we should bet against Linux-powered AI. Got it. But you make a good point, because I think what you're really getting, if you can transition your workload over to Linux, is you're getting a universal platform that isn't necessarily even tied to System 76.
Well, it's even less than that. I'm getting a platform that more matches where the actual functionality and actual complexity of the software that I'm developing
But
is.
I think that independence is what's going to make it a standout platform for AI and bot development.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of my largest clients right now is an iOS app with a Linux backend, and the iOS app is basically a pseudo-pretty front end to a really complicated Rails app on a Linux server, right? The actual challenge of that project has nothing to do with the iOS app, right? The biggest pain in the ass is, oh my God, auto layout constraints suck.
Yeah.
Where there's payment processing, there's all kinds of stuff going on the Linux side that, frankly, are more interesting.
I will say this too. I think, sometimes in the past, when you were kind of hoping and betting on RT or Android Wear, I kind of listen like, okay, you make a compelling case, and I think in both cases you released compelling products. I'm like, oh, right, that does make sense for that platform. But I never really felt like that was the direction the puck was actually going, and I thought, boy, if he's right, he's going to have a hit. But it doesn't feel like it's the right direction. This seems like an obvious direction because of Linux's presence on the cloud and the very back-end nature and compute requirements of AI and bots. This seems
And let's be, bigger picture here, other than little tiny ass Buccaneer tech in a crappy 2-room office in Eatontown, right? Let's think about, Google and Apple and Microsoft, and what are the headline grabbing things other than new shiny hardware that we can send to Walt Mossberg? Well, it's AI, it's Google Home, it's Google AI, it's Cortana, which Microsoft, is kind of repurposing for the Microsoft bot framework, which I have to say we haven't covered much since I initially brought it up, but is super interesting.
Maybe a future episode.
Right. It's some of these open source bot tools. There's one in Golang that in particular I think is really good. It's Mycroft, though I do have to say I don't know how Mycroft is going to end up stacking up to MS Bot Framework or, let me tell you what it's not, though, right? It's not Siri. It's not, I hate to say this, but in a lot of ways, the front-end design stuff of iOS apps, I feel like is very aggressively becoming commoditized.
Yeah.
Which is not a place I want to live in because I have a wife and a kid.
Yeah, but I don't feel like you can make much stronger of an argument on any other mobile platform either.
Well, I think it's about staying current, right? We talked about this on like episode 10 or something, where, the cycle is roughly 5 years, and this has been far more than 5 years that I've been relatively loyal to the iOS Android ecosystem. And we're getting to the point where, everybody that should have an app is either having one or they know how to develop one for not that much money.
Also, the other side, the market sort of decided where they value apps from both the user purchasing perspective and the people looking to have these created, and I don't think it's where you want it to be.
Well, I think it's, let's be brutal. It's really, really tough to compete with, Upwork, although there's an article about that in the subreddit.
Yeah.
Right, but $100 an hour versus $10 an hour. That's a hell of a competition, right? I don't know. And it's not what I want to do, to be honest, anymore. I mean, I don't mind building iOS apps. I don't mind building Android apps. I do it all the time. But I definitely think that they've become mature enough that, it is a service I offer. It is my primary service. But that is probably not the 10 years out future.
Yeah. And the other thing, think about it, in some sense, Linux is becoming such a dominant platform. And really, Ubuntu, in such a big way, is the biggest platform.
Yeah. I mean, this is a little scary. There is a side story here about kind of an Ubuntu sort of hegemony.
I agree, but if you look at it from the advantage that market presence gives you as a developer to target it, you don't have to worry about is this going to sell better or do better in the iOS App Store, or is this going to be better on Android, and how should I model this? Because in this space, and specifically for businesses, a lot of them are already going to be running Linux, and there's going to be the differences between Red Hat and Ubuntu for development are becoming less and less, and there's going to be people willing to pay because it's business stuff, it's enterprise.
Right, but let's be clear, right? So I see the front ends of this software being iOS apps, Android apps, web apps.
That makes sense, or at least
I don't think
one
they
of
go
them.
away. But I think they become the kind of junior level, hire a designer plus one or two junior devs on a 1099 commoditized part of the equation.
Yeah.
I don't think they are the thing that I'm able to go in and bid, a six-figure contract for.
But it might be part of, you can come and say, we can build this part of it, and as part of the entire package, my team can also.
You're right. It's part of the service, but it is not the primary service, right? And we're seeing this already. I mean, I wish I remember the names of the app, but there's an app out there on the iOS store and the Google Play Store where you can ask it like history questions, and it's a bot. And all it is a very thin, I think it's actually a React Native interface to some AI Microsoft bot framework functionality on the web. In fact, it may be made by Microsoft for all I know. But all it does is, it's a very slick, very quick, but very simple iOS app, and all the love is happening, or all the magic is happening on the server. That is, I think, where we're going. And you know what? As a developer, that makes a lot of sense to me, because there's nothing worse than having a bug in a heavy client where you have to go through app review to get it fixed.
Especially when there is. It's not just a multi-platform world that you have to deliver apps for, but it's on desktops, in web browsers, on tablets, on phones, even possibly on watches, potentially on what these people want. And so having the logic on the back-end server where you can add as much networking and compute and storage as you need, it just seems obvious once the connectivity is sufficient enough to deliver the results fast enough, which we're getting there. And of course, if it's a business, they'll make it work with good Wi-Fi or Ethernet connections or whatever. It just seems like it's an obvious direction. So having more familiarity on your laptop with it and working with this tool set is probably going to better position you. So so I have a couple of things that you've gotten pushback on that I thought maybe we should bring up. And then I have a question I want to ask, but let's take a moment. Speaking of that back-end infrastructure, and let's mention DigitalOcean. This is a great place to go and use our promo code CODERDIGITAL to try building something on a server that you could use either for yourself to learn more about it or in production, or try something out, maybe an open source project that you've seen that you want to deploy and you don't want to bother loading it on your own machine. In fact, even when there'd be something I would normally load up in like a VirtualBox or VMware or KVM instance, I go to DigitalOcean because you can get started in less than 55 seconds. And the pricing plans are great. You can either pay per hour, which is just an unbelievably low rate, or you can get like their $5 a month rig. And if you use our promo code CODERDIGITAL, you get the $10 credit. Run it for 2 months for free. And they've got data centers in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, London, Toronto, and Germany. And I think something I don't mention enough, and I love it because they kind of pointed out with their Germany data center, but in a lot of cases they're always very strategic about where they place these data centers, so that way they're in the center of a lot of connectivity. So if you're over in Europe and you want great speeds in that general area, they've gone to great lengths to make sure that the data center in Germany will serve you well. I think that's pretty clever. And when I was distributing files via BitTorrent Sync for Unfilter, and now I'll be transitioning to LibreVault, I'm using droplets that are placed strategically in different locations for $5 a month. So that way when folks on the East Coast or someone over across the pond starts to download these huge multi-100 megabyte files, they're not getting it from some server in San Francisco. It's like having an entire pro-level data center that you can spin up machines on demand that's all under your control with an amazing interface and incredible pricing. And it allows even a small shop or a larger shop to have the presence and the horsepower of a multinational Google-type enterprise. I mean, it's so great. It's so enabling. And it's nothing that was even available at the beginning of this podcast. It's so fascinating to watch DigitalOcean go. And I think they really got the formula right. A great interface, a straightforward, really nicely designed API, SSDs for all of the storage, and pricing that makes sense. DigitalOcean.com, just use our promo code CODERDIGITAL to support the show and get a $10 credit. And a big thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. So 2 things that came up a lot I saw online from your blog post. The first was one I really liked, but let's address the second one. Because I think there's more meat on the first one. But the second one was, well, how are you going to do iOS development now? How are you going to do it now, smart guy? I don't know if you saw that.
Jackass.
There's a few people on G Plus that.
Yeah, I saw it. I mean, Mac Mini server, right? I'm swimming in a lake of Mac Minis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like your old Macs go away, right?
Right. They don't you don't buy a System76 machines and the Macs file for divorce. That's not what happens.
Ryan doesn't show up at your house and knock on the door and say, okay, now you've received your Lemur. Will you please hand over all of your Macs?
Yeah, the Linux Gestapo don't walk in and be like, sir, are you hiding any Macs here? I don't know what accent that was, but it was not German.
I think it was Russian-Japanese. It's like some sort of weird World War II combo thing.
Oh, sad times.
So, okay, now here was the number one thing I heard people just absolutely decry. And I actually love that you just came out and were honest about it. And you just say, I'm going to just address content consumption. I've got a lot of movies in iTunes, a lot of music. I've got books. I've got magazines. So I like the content ecosystem. And this seems but now that you're a Linux user, Mike, what are you going to do?
Yeah, let me backpedal you a little bit. So I've learned a lesson over doing this show and writing blog posts. You should meditate on what nasty shit people are going to say to you on Twitter and answer them preemptively in the blog post. Yeah. So that's the whole section about content consumption is, yes, I am aware that I've spent money on iTunes. And the answer is, again, it is not like, the Gestapo comes in. I do not have to hand over my Apple TV or my iOS. You know what? You know what's going to be on my desk with the Lemur? An iPad Pro. Because I watch YouTube and I watch movies. And
yeah, and the Apple TV works for you, and you can still use that to get the content.
Right. And I have 189 movies or something in Apple TV. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah. I'm not I don't understand, to be honest with you, kind of the feedback I got about, well, you can't use both.
Yeah, people are shocked when they find out that Linux user Chris likes to use an iPhone over Android.
Yeah, I'm probably still going to carry an iPhone, to be honest, because the battery life and the GPS are better where I live.
The performance is great, and now with the 7, they have optical image stabilization in the camera, which is a big deal for me. I just look at it like this. Both platforms are essentially the same thing. And so I look at Google's profit motive and I look at Apple's and I say, all right, gouge me up front for the expensive iPhone, and I'll just pay. I like this arrangement. You make money off the hardware, and I use the software, and I pick the back-end services I want to use.
I think Apple's actually done a really good job on the content consumption front, to be honest. I mean, I read The New Yorker, I read The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, all on my iPad. Yeah. And you know what? I have a Nexus 7, but those apps suck on the Nexus 7. I mean, the Android equivalency is... You almost feel like somebody paid some contractor a third of what they paid the iOS company to do them.
Yeah, it does. I haven't messed with them much because I just prefer not to get wrapped up in it at all because I knew if I got invested, I would be in the same position. But I have played a little bit with the different news applications, and I do seem to prefer the ones on the Apple side. I just find it to be better. But people are shocked that that's my preference. And I find it to be kind of same that people are so shocked that you like to use Apple TV and iOS and iTunes. It's not my preferred setup, but I'm like, man, I'm glad that works for you. That's nice.
I mean, of course, there's an element of lock-in, right? When you have 180-something movies on Apple TV, you're very unlikely to want to change. I mean, it's a lot of money I've spent on Apple TV. Yeah. But I guess I don't – maybe you can explain it. I don't really understand why me doing my work on a Linux machine would somehow stop me from going home and watching Netflix on an Apple TV with my wife. I honestly don't get it.
I think the response is traditionally the traditional Linux user is one who's doing it not just out of workflow, but maybe even more so, or at least in equal part out of moral outrage at the vendor lock-in or
but I
at
have
the
no
licensing or the proprietary software or the patents. You know, there's some moral issue for them too that's brought them over, and so there maybe. I don't think people are as accustomed that there might be people that want to use Linux simply because it's a good system to get work done on, and that's the number one reason.
Yeah, I mean, one day Satan's going to come for my soul, and the poor bastard's going to leave empty-handed because there's not much left. But yeah, I have no morals, right? Like, I don't care about any of that stuff. In fact, I get annoyed when, like, I install, Arch or Fedora and I can't have MP3 codecs. Like, I'm like, all right, guys, I don't really give a rat's ass. Let them sue me. Like,
yeah.
Really?
Well, okay. So I thought that was an interesting part in your blog, and I thought it was good that you just sort of decided to attack it head on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's going to be an interesting purchase. I would love it if it showed up before we wrap up the show.
I hope so. I
think that's probably not likely.
Seems unlikely. I mean, when they say end of business, they mean like 449, 59.
Yeah.
In that range.
You're not the only guy doing this, though. There was a blog post by, I think it's Pator is how you say his name, and he talks about switching from Windows 10 to Linux for .NET development. And he kind of had I think an inkling. He doesn't come right out and say it, but he went to sit down at his machine and he realized he'd had enough when he got an error message that came up said that Windows was installing updates, and about 20 minutes had gone by and it was still installing updates. And then it rebooted and it installed more updates, which in the end took almost an hour in the middle of his day. He called it the Windows 10 out of nowhere update. Yeah. He says it wasn't a total emotion decision, though. He'd been thinking about it for a while. And he moved over to Windows Mint, and the first thing he did was he installed .NET Core Framework. And
Mint is an easy transition, too. I mean, Mint is even easier than Ubuntu.
I agree. Yeah, Cinnamon, yeah. He says, but .NET was easy to install. He had maybe like one or two problems, but it was very simple. And then he said he looked into his tools to use. He installed Git and MongoDB and Redis and Slack and Skype. And then he looked around and looked at Visual Studio Code and looked at Vim and looked at ReSharper and OmniSharp. And he ended up with Visual Studio Code on Linux to do his development work. He's got a screenshot of it here too. Yeah, he did. So he did Visual Studio Code and OmniSharp.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty decent setup. I mean, one thing for maybe the students in the audience or more junior people is, there's at least I think when I went to school, there's a misconception that like Mac and Windows are far more similar. That's actually not true, right? Mac is Unix and therefore much closer to Ubuntu or any other flavor of Linux, particularly Ubuntu now though because of the UI. Windows is actually kind of the weird one. Windows is fundamentally different.
Yeah. Although you can now get the Ubuntu subsystem, which kind of is interesting and normalizes, but it's still another piece running on top of another thing. It's not the system.
I mean, have we heard from people really using that in production though? I mean, that seems super voodoo-y to me.
I think it's being used. I mean, I think it's legit, but I don't know anybody who's like, well, now finally I can use Windows.
It's a translation layer, right? So they're taking the Windows system calls and they're taking the Linux system calls and converting them into Windows calls, right?
I believe so. Yep.
Yeah.
He also points out in his blog post here that Docker kind of made a big part of his decision. And he says, yeah, of course you can run Docker on Windows, but you have to use Hyper-V or VirtualBox. Yep. And I got some errors when I tried to do it. And he says different Docker builds would throw out errors sometimes, some wouldn't. And when I was looking at it now with microservices and the CQRS patterns, it seems like a good idea to have Docker images and containers right there on his own system. So Docker is another reason why he wanted to use Linux for development. So you may be part of a larger trend, which I've kind of been wondering about for a while, especially as Apple seems to be kind of lukewarm on the Mac platform. Like even if they update the MacBooks, do you think they're going to update the Mini? Are they going to ship a new Mini? Where's the new Apple monitor at? What's going on with the Mac Pro? Yeah. Like they need to update every model.
So to be fair, there's been leaks about the Apple monitor, right? It's going to be 5K, which I am not a monitor snob. I'm more into audio, but I don't really get why you'd want a monitor that can't display the content you're likely watching online. But all of that aside,
or even if you're trying to use like a Retina iOS emulator or a simulator, just being able to do iOS development on a quote unquote Retina desktop screen is kind of huge. And think about all the MacBook Pros out there that are probably hooked up to Dell monitors or something else that's a higher resolution.
I don't think many people are doing dev on a MacBook Pro. I think the workhorse is MacBook Pro. Yes, not Mac Pro. Yeah, I thought you said Mac Pro.
Yeah. But I guess here's why I bring it up is not to derail the conversation too much, but the reason why I bring it up is I think when developers are looking at building software for the quote-unquote Linux platform, and that's going to be more and more people for the reasons we just outlined a few minutes ago. It's already a lot of people, and it's going to be more.
But we shouldn't be crazy, right? A lot of this is going to tone down once Apple comes out with the new MacBook Pro next week.
But what's the point? If you're developing for the cloud, if you're developing for Linux systems, why spend that much on a computer that you're not sure what the update cadence is?
Well, that's basically my argument, right? My argument is that the way I predominantly sell systems and make money is no longer tied to Apple-specific stuff. In fact, the Apple stuff is kind of an afterthought. But I don't know. See, I guess I don't see where you're going with this because, this MacBook Pro is going to sell out in minutes. There's just no way that's not going to happen.
Oh, for sure. I'm not trying to proclaim any kind of doom. I think what I'm trying to proclaim is that I think there's probably a larger majority of users out there than we realize that are like yourself. They're going through this same thought process. And I think more and more people, I've been saying this for a little while, but I honestly do think I keep seeing little indicators that don't mean at the end for any one company, don't mean the onslaught of new users for one particular distro. I think there's just going to be less and less people for development reasons that buy a Mac over time.
So I'm actually going to hit it a little harder than you then. If I'm right, and some of the other commentators are right, that this AI, this bot functionality, this back-end artificial intelligence is going to be the next battleground, that really isn't good for Apple.
Right. That's exactly it.
Because of just the, I hate to say this, but the corporate culture, right? The cultural locked in, kind of closed, we'll hold your hand, which I like. I mean, that's why I like Apple stuff on the content consumption side, because you know what? They hold my hand and my movies always work unless iTunes is down. But they more or less always work. Everything works. It's really not that hard. However, it's probably not where the innovation is going to be. I mean, sure, there's going to be some designer who comes out with some beautiful iOS app that's really nice. And there's going to be, Omni Group is still around, right? They're going to make awesome iPad apps. Panic is still around. They're going to make great Mac and great iOS software.
And there's going to be lots of people that are creating software for the Apple ecosystem that'll be buying Macs.
But do you know what the problem with all that is? Panic and Omni Group exist. And it's really, really hard to try to break into that. Yeah. And, for anybody new or anybody who's kind of like a consultant who has products, but they're not huge, right? They're just, little products here and there that basically serve as portfolio pieces. I would probably challenge you and say, all right, well, are you getting a $2 million bank loan?
Here's a challenge, Mike.
Yeah.
I would ask, can anyone in the audience find a Mac and iOS development company that has launched in the last, say, 2 years that's selling an app at a premium price, say more than $30? Can you find it?
Wait. So an iOS or macOS development company that is selling an app. So how are we defining selling?
Through like the Mac App Store or on their website.
So straight up, you buy the app.
Yep.
What year was Sketch launched?
I don't know.
They're $100 and they're extremely successful.
So there's certain categories, right? This is where I was going to go. It's like professional audio and video. Yeah, you bet. I can think of a couple for sure. And in development tools and things like that. Yep, absolutely.
Paint code is within 2 years.
Yep.
I almost guarantee.
But what's that? What kind of application is that?
Well, it's a developer tool. I use it, right? It generates, instead of using PNGs, it'll generate me Bezier curve-based Swift and Objective-C code.
My point is that's such a small pond to be a success in that, and then you compare that to the size of server-side code running on Linux and the prices you can charge there, because you can charge so much more. You can charge so much more there, like factors of 5 more. I mean, so much more there that you can sell at a lower volume. Even
you also, I don't want to get it back into the Dash thing, but if your primary value is on the server side, you don't have this, existential risk, right, of a gatekeeper deciding that they hate you for whatever reason, which
not only is it the gatekeeper issue and all of that, but let's go back to the examples we just talked about and the ones the chat room just. All of these professional or creative professional applications are the type of application that requires the investment of an entire company, a multi-staff production. It's not they're big. When you go big, you really have to have a solid group of people and company behind that to sustain an application like that for professional use. Whereas I think the other type of server-side development, that can absolutely be the case at times, but there's probably a lot more opportunities to get in with a smaller team and scale as needed and still sell at a higher margin. Like the Panic people are an entire company. That's with many employees.
Omni is huge, right? I mean,
the Omni Group is another fine example. The Omni Group is another fine example of a large company to support this. And I'm thinking of some of the professional audio tools we've bought in the past.
Although, I think you're underselling the amount of work these AI systems
Maybe
bots are. I mean, think about this. You have to hire copywriters, right? These bots have to have a personality.
Here's where I can see that, but that all seems like. But you have to have you pretty much have to have an entire team ready to go the day your professional application launches for professional developers and production and creative professionals.
How do you mean?
How you have to launch the application with a certain set of features and functionality that justify a high price tag that is good, that is well enough designed and is functional enough that it somehow gets that upper echelon in.
So you're saying there's been so much downward pressure on prices that to command that $30+ price tag that you've set your bar at requires such a heavy investment that no small shop could really do it.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Unless you have major VC backing or something.
I actually completely agree with that.
And I think with the bot stuff, it's very expensive, but that cost scales so you can start small. The core engine and all of that, you could be a one-man person, and then as you add functionality, I don't know. It feels like that's more scalable to me.
Well, I don't think it's more scalable. I think it's newer and standards are lower, right? The Apple guys like to talk about there's this Apple iOS treadmill and macOS treadmill, where every year the standard for a quote-unquote good iOS app gets higher and higher and higher. And that's actually true, right? It's just obviously true to me. But that's not good for independent developers because it just costs you more money. So I look at this as though I were, my own client. I'm the consultant for my client. Hey, man, if you're charging $3 a license, you basically can't compete. So don't do it, right? So do something else or make your money somewhere else. And what I think, and this is where I think you and I are going to diverge a little bit, is I think the only reason this bot/AI market is going to be more forgiving is that it's like App Store circa 2008. It's brand new.
Okay.
And it's novel, and people's standards are just far lower.
And it's still maturing. Yeah, so that doesn't have to be the same.
You can get away with a lot of bugginess and a lot of rough corners that, you just can't if you want to get featured, if you want.
And let's be honest, it's much more practical to iterate the features and improve the application on the server side than it is.
Well, there is that, right? I could do daily deployments.
Yeah.
Right. That's again, that's an issue with the App Store. And I don't want to get into a conversation about, is the gatekeeper a net positive or good? Because the gatekeeper or negative, because the gatekeepers existed since 2008. And it's 2016.
It's not going anywhere. Yeah.
It's not going anywhere. Right? I mean, fighting that battle is like, you know what, Chris? Let's have our last stand at the Alamo.
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, energy is better spent elsewhere.
Right.
I agree. Well, okay. So I have a couple more things for us to chat about, including a little real talk about designing good APIs. But we've been talking a lot about server-side development and creating software on Linux. I want to take a moment and thank our sponsor, Linux Academy. This is a great tie-in if anything in this space interests you. linuxacademy.com/coders is where you go, and you can sign up for a free 7-day trial now. That's new, and that's amazing. They have all kinds of great content for you, and many of the subjects on Linux, the really deep stuff, and all of the applications and cool technologies built on top of it that not only are interesting to learn, but will make you some money, including things like AWS and OpenStack and even Azure. They have step-by-step video courses with comprehensive study guides that you can download and take with you offline. Courseware comes with its own server and spins it up as you need it. There's 7+ distros you choose from, and the courseware in the servers automatically adjusts to match that. You keep track of your progress as you go along. They have tracks that are specific for like certs if you want to do that, or people that have really limited time. They have availability planners and quick dives that get you in there, little quick takes that are like, couple of quick courses that give you information, or nuggets, or like little bits of wisdom about a unique thing or challenge. And if you're commuting, you have a little downtime, maybe you're on the bus, they have iOS and Android apps. They have note cards that the community forks and makes even better. Labs that give you hands-on scenario-based training. And of course, instructor mentoring is available when you need it. And now with public profiles, you can help show your employer or potential client the kind of good work you've been doing. And with a 7-day free trial, you can jump in and start trying out some of the courseware and see how it goes. So check them out at linuxacademy.com/coders, and a big thanks to Linux Academy for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. So I found this in the subreddit. It's how to design APIs that don't suck. And there's a couple of points I thought I'd rattle off. Be explicit. Be clear. This is perhaps the most important tip. If you have a method called getUser and it causes some side effect without being explicit about it, that can lead to a lot of problems. Okay, that's a good one. Keep your surface areas for your APIs small. No one likes bloated programs. I think that's obvious, but good. Reduce boilerplate. There's less there's less for the consumer to have to do, the lesser the possible number of bugs you end up dealing with. Reduce dependencies. Try to keep your code as self-contained as possible. The more dependencies you have, the more potential problems it can cause downstream in consumer code. And please, for the love of God, return meaningful error states. I like that one. Undefined is not a function. There's apparently a Xena Warrior Princess meme that I never seen before. And save exceptions for truly exceptional cases. I like that one too. And then document all of the things. Documentation is boring, and like many boring things at least, it is essential. And good documentation can save your sanity. And then write tests. Tests are proof of correctness and documentation in the sample code. Write tests, which nobody likes to do. And of course, make it testable. And there's more in there, which I will link you in the show notes, including one that I thought was kind of interesting, which you can read about, is don't allow too much user choice. That is Anoop, I think is how you say his name. That's how he designs APIs that don't suck. I felt like a little good advice right there. A little real talk.
I mean, I will say though, a lot of that stuff is things people
Basics?
who have the. Well, no. I would actually hit that a lot harder. That's great if you have a salary, and you're not on a fixed bid, and you're not.
Yeah. There's a little high and mighty in there.
Huh? Right. There's a little bit of like, I will say when I read stuff like that, I like to look up, all right, so what do you do for a living? Oh, you have a W-2 and you work at Facebook. Okay. Like, yeah, I got to tell you right now, like unit tests are the first things that go in the toilet, right?
Oh, yeah.
Documentation right in the toilet. Because you know what? You get paid your $8,000 or $10,000 regardless of that. And you don't get paid any more for that.
Yeah, there's usually if there's an incentive for you to document it, you might do it.
Well, if it's going to be your project for 2 years. I mean, there is a...
By the way, he works at Google.
Of course, right? Of course he works at Google. I mean, how can I say this nicely, Chris? There are, I almost feel like, multiple classes of developers here, right? And contractors, unless you're working for like Booz Allen, although they're having all kinds of problems. I mean, yeah. You know what? Maybe we'll just say Northrop Grumman, because Booz Allen's got issues. You have lots of luxuries that those of us in the seedy, dirty contracting world don't, right? You have the ability to be like, you know what? If it takes me another 3 days, I'll still be paid for that. Contractors sometimes won't. And scope creep's a thing that exists. And scope creep's bad. I'm not saying scope creep at a W-2, sort of you're the software architect, isn't destructive to the product. But a lot of times for contractors, scope creep means unfunded labor.
Yeah. Which
is really, really bad in a lot of significant ways.
Yeah.
That I sometimes don't think these guys from Google or Facebook or even Microsoft get it. And they say, well, you should just be doing a better job. But the problem with
they say try harder. Just try harder.
Oh, no. They say, well, don't take those kind of projects. But you have to like hit a number, right? You have to eat. I mean, there's a certain level of, I guess, we I interview people all the time because we have like rolling interviews. And one of the questions every single Rails developer asks, do you do unit testing? And I said, it depends on the project. Because you know what? It depends. If the project's hourly, sure. If it's not, no. I mean, that's kind of the way it goes. Because unless you're being paid for, one, I don't think fixed bid projects make sense for anybody. They're bad for the vendor. They're bad for the client. And they set you up in an adversarial relationship that, the minimum bad thing that's going to happen is that the code's not documented and it's going to take forever to do the project. And you're not going to have any tests. The best, the worst thing that's going to happen is the project's never going to ship because the client will not know exactly what they bought. The vendor will have a very, very, very specific idea on what they sold, and it will be much smaller than what the client thought he bought. And there's no real happy medium there, which that's a whole nother show episode, right? About like why fixed bids are, you basically, I spend a lot of time agonizing about how can you make them work. And the answer is you just can't sell them. And if somebody insists on a fixed bid, you basically have to turn down the job.
Here's how I look at that blog post, and we'll have it linked in the show notes if you guys want to read all of them. It's they seem basic and great ones to follow, and I would say probably all of them are followable to an extent. And then, like, you get into the practical real-world situation, the practical side of development that you're talking about right now, and some of those boxes get unchecked. I don't think any of them are necessarily wrong on their face, but what they do represent to me a little bit after listening to you is a little they seem like there's a little sense of try harder. If you're not doing this, you need to be trying it harder. You're doing it wrong. And I guess the thing I take issue is, yes, that is technically possible for you to do these things, but also we are this far into this son of a gun, and we're still talking about this. It's obvious that we need a better way. To me, it seems.
But this is a natural part of the.
Yes.
And
there's different levels of jobs where these things are more people are absolutely like documentation is absolutely worth paying for. I have had clients on the technical side who have said, okay, I absolutely will pay you for documentation time. This is very valuable to us. And others where you're right, it absolutely has gone by the wayside.
Well, and like if get users creates a side effect, that's obviously bad. I'm not advocating that. But, I will say I love to use the car analogy with people because it's something that, the types of business guys that I end up dealing with understand. It's like, you know what? I can sell you a Chevy, a Kia, and a Cadillac. Actually, it's a Kia, a Chevy, and a Cadillac, right? But understand that if you buy the Kia, it's, you're not going to be happy. And if you buy the Chevy, you'll be okay. And I know you won't buy the Cadillac. You get what you pay for, right? I mean, there is a time, and you know this probably from IT consulting. There's a time-honored tradition of vendors beating the shit out of the previous vendor.
Yes,
right?
Yeah.
In fact, I recently had a situation like this where a new vendor comes in, and his entire mission in life is to say everything we did sucked. I'm like, okay, that's great. Well, you can either work with us or not.
It's a blank check usually for a few months.
It's a blank check because then you can say, oh, we're refactoring. And I have heard of cases where clients have gone with another vendor. The vendor said they were refactoring. They fired the vendor. We got the code back. They literally did nothing. Like literally nothing.
Yeah,
why? Because it's highway robbery.
I've been on both ends of it, and it's something I stopped doing towards the end. But man, I tell you what, Mike, it is brutal. It's a brutal process because it allows you to justify a lot of big decisions that you can make, and it's too tempting not to use it as leverage to take action on things long term are better for the project. It's very tempting. It's sort of like how politicians take advantage of a disaster to pass new laws.
Right. Let's refactor this old ass PHP code base to Rails. Right. Like, I can't say I've never done it, but I can say that there is a level of, I guess, practice what you preach that I just don't think happens. Like, I never preach unit testing because you know what? I don't really practice it unless the client is willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
I'm
sure Google's willing to, because that guy works in Android development. I bet Google is willing to pay for that.
Google's want to buy you sushi for lunch every day, right? That is a different sort of ball game. And that's kind of the point I'm getting at. You are effectively in a different business. Contractors are facing pressures, particularly now with this new wave of what I would call productization of development services, where you have all these very shady piranha-style companies saying, oh, we'll sell you our system. It's not really a system. They're just subcontracting it to some little shop who is going to fight with them about scope for a year. But, they're calling it a system.
Yeah.
And they're trying to sell it to you at a flat price. That is just, I mean, this is a whole big topic for another day about the productization of development services. And what I would actually call, productization, I think is a euphemism. It's like making love. It's really commoditization, or basically fucking over little development shops in the most brutal way.
That could be an entire topic for a future episode. Mr. Dominic, that was touching.
It was touching.
Do you want to give people a chance to maybe send you tips about your new rig or
things? At Doomadico on Twitter, and I would say once I get it, I might do some unboxing pictures on Twitter at dominic.com.
And I hope we can hear a little more about it next week and hear about how the setup has gone and all of that. And of course, just full disclosure, nothing we talked about today was sponsored by any companies other than the ones we're clear sponsors. System76 is not a sponsor on this show.
Well, actually, Dick Cheney's company sponsors every show, Halliburton.
Yeah, but we do that through the shadow companies that we have set up through a bunch of different shell corporations that all donate as patrons. So we don't have to tell them about that. Yeah. It's nice and...
Sorry.
Oh, wait, are we still recording? Oh, jeez. Gonna have to edit that out. All right. So, Mr. Dominic, you know what? Wait a minute. Hold on. Where'd our music go? Well, I guess we have to do another 15 minutes of show because our music just stopped. Well, so why don't we talk about politics? Oh, no. Oh, hey, there it goes again. There we go again. Oh, yeah, that was my long track. That's right. We have a long track.
Music and sorry.
We have a long and a short version of our outro. All right, well, then I better say the last few things before this thing wraps up, because this is the short version. Go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com/contact to send us your emails. There's a drop down there for Coda Radio. Join us live next week. We do it on Mondays over at jblive.tv. Get it converted at your local time at jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar. Your feedback, links, and all kinds of other good stuff are absolutely appreciated over at codaradio.reddit.com. And that's also a good spot to find a thread for every single episode of the Coda Radio program. Okay, everyone, thanks so much for tuning this week's episode of Coda Radio, and we'll see you right back here next Monday.